Christen, welcome to the United podcast.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm doing fine. The weather's been crazy today. All types of weather. That's what we get
Are
in
you used to
Manchester.
that in England now?
Yeah, that's what I always say. Manchester's very moody.
A little bit different from LA, I suppose, and growing up then. But you know what? It is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I've lived all over. I haven't lived in LA since I was 18, so experienced all different types of people and culture and weathers, and it's part of the journey for sure.
What about the people in Manchester? How have you found settling in your time here?
It's been great. Obviously, with COVID, it's been an unusual time. And really the people that I've spent my time with are just my teammates and the staff. And I've loved playing with them, and I've loved spending time and getting to know all the girls and the staff. I think it's a really special group. And I do think it's funny to me because Manchester people like complain about the weather so much. And it's like, if in the US generally, like wherever you live, you try to like argue that like your town is like the best town and your weather is like the best weather. But like in Manchester, they just like give it to you the first day and they've never stopped talking about how terrible it is here.
Yeah, welcome to England.
Yeah,
I read an
exactly.
interview with you earlier in preparation for this, in which you'd said, I think you'd done it in November, and you said you maybe a year ago you couldn't have seen yourself moving to England to be part of the Women's Super League. How do you feel now that you're coming to the end of the season about being in England and making this move and this whole new chapter in your career?
Yeah, I think a year ago, well, I guess now a year and a half, it was a time where you still had plans and you still had like a future, and there was there was the illusion of certainty, things that I knew would happen in my life. And in the last year and a half, I think all of us have experienced the disintegration of that perception and the true transience of our life. And you know, I hadn't thought about moving back to Europe. I obviously have played in Europe before, and I for no particular reason, just thought my life was going to be moving back home, getting closer and closer to LA if possible. And because of the madness that was last year and not playing for a really long time, it was a very quick and impulsive decision to like pick up and move and come here for Tobin and I. And it wasn't stressful. We did it like with ease and like excitement, but it just wasn't like a long drawn out, like thoughtful process of like, why do we want to go? Should we stay or should we? We were just sort of like, we want to play. And like we have an opportunity to play. So in that, I feel like now when I'm looking back, it like what a blessing in disguise for myself. What a unforeseen blessing that I was given to come here and be able to play consistently for the last 9 months and be in an environment that challenged me and helped me grow.
And I suppose because you did have Tobin in that situation, it maybe made a little bit easier for you to make that move. You had each other. It's a bit of a comfort blanket when you're going somewhere completely new.
Yeah, I think so. But at the same time, when I moved to Sweden in 2012, I did that on my own. And I feel like once I like decide that I'm going to do something, I'm not the person that then is like wishing I was doing something else, or I'm not homesick. I was here and I was present in this experience, and that's why I feel like I enjoyed it so much.
So let's go back to the very beginning. We know you were born and you grew up in Los Angeles. Your dad was an American footballer, and by that I don't mean soccer as in gridiron, right? And your mum played tennis. 2 sisters, and what was life like for you? I guess very sporty.
Yeah, soccer was definitely a family affair from when I was really young. My parents coached and managed our little youth teams, and I learned how to play the game side by side with my sisters. So I think like the good memories are like traditional, I like traditional LA soccer family memories of like packing up the minivan and like driving out 2 hours on a Sunday with like the cooler in the back, and all of us playing in like various games and like bouncing around from field to field. And that's kind of how I fell in love with the game. And a lot of it for me was really trying to make my family proud. And there was a long time in my career that I felt that it could bring my family joy to win, to be great. And that's the biggest motivator that I had.
Was it always an aspiration for you to become a footballer and indeed play for your national team, something which you've done over 100 times now, an incredible achievement? Or at that young age, did you not really think that that was in your sights at the time?
I don't have any young memories of like dreaming about professional soccer, which didn't exist then in the US, or dreaming of the national team. But I have a photo of myself and my team at the 1999 World Cup in Los Angeles with my face painted red, white, and blue and like the whole kit. And I can see it in my eyes that it was a dream, but it's not something that I remember. Obviously, the soccer system's a little different in the US, and I always recall trying to make like the next step. So when I was a youth player, like trying to make the youth national team, when I was in high school, trying to make, trying to have the opportunity to play at a scholarship college, and be the best. And it wasn't until college where a lot of my teammates started getting called up to the national team and started going pro that ambition became like the next step.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that ambition in you come from? Even because you talk about at a young age, like looking at those next steps and trying to reach those goals. Is that driven from the love of the game, or does that come from you as an individual away from sport, that you're a very driven, maybe competitive person?
Yeah, I'm certainly driven. And I do think if it wasn't football, it would be something else. I love the game. I love the lessons and the never-ending challenge that football is. The fact that it's so clear that you can never do it perfectly, like I love that. But I think just how I am, I really have always been super competitive. I competed against my sisters in everything that we did, and I'm a middle child, so a lot of it was competing for my parents' attention. And I think that from my family unit, that's where like all of my drive came. And it was not, I was very young when my parents decided that I could be great at football, and they were more driven than I was. And so they were the ones telling me to go in the backyard and play, and don't forget to like take the extra shot. And they were the ones like managing my schedule to make sure I could do all the things that I needed to do. And then I think I just obviously like absorbed that drive and that desire to be great, and carried it with me.
I can't be the only person to notice this. You started off saying soccer, and during that answer you said football twice.
Well, it was hard because actually you said American football. So then I was thinking like, well, what are we saying here? I try to say football when I'm speaking to someone who says football. And then when I speak to like Americans, I always say soccer. But now I got really thrown by your reference of American football.
But what would you call American football? Oh, I suppose you just call it football.
Yeah.
Of course you would. Yeah, you wouldn't have American. It wouldn't make any sense.
I just want to ask you, I'm going to move a little bit further on, just want to ask you about your debut, when you did eventually make your debut for the national team. What was that moment like then for you and all of your family? Because I think maybe to get there for you, did you find it quite a difficult road?
Yeah, my first cap happened in 2013, I think, in January. And I remember it very, very well because it was the first time I had ever played in front of, a 20,000 person crowd. And my dad flew out for the game. I think my mom and my dad both flew out for the game. And I was so incredibly nervous. And I had exactly, as you kind of alluded to, like this feeling like all my life I had been like waiting for this moment. And in my mind, it felt like it came really late. Like I had wanted to be on the national team for like 3 or 4 years. So I felt like I had waited so long for this moment. And then the game itself was really easy. And it was surprising because like I had this like thought about myself that like I didn't do well under pressure. This was going to be too much for me. And when I got in the game, it was very easy. It was like an easy match. We didn't like win by a lot, but there was just this intuitive understanding that I had with the players and with the culture and with the system of what we were trying to achieve that made it possible for me to actually show my best, even though it was like, you know, a monumental moment in my life and career.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna read for a second, if that's okay. So you now have 144 caps, 60 goals, which I think puts you 9th on the all-time top scorers list. And during that time, and I've heard and seen before that you maybe fell out of love with the game a little bit through your desperation to play for the women's national team and get in the first team. And so you did break in. You've played all those games, you've scored all those goals, you've picked up 2 World Cup winners' medals, the CONCACAF Women's Championships 2014-2018, the Women's Olympic Qualifying Tournament 2016-2020, the Algarve Cup in 2013, 2015, the She Believes Cup in 2016, 2018, 2020, 2021, the Tournament of Nations 2018, and then all of your individual awards. That is extraordinary, is it not?
It's a long list. I guess that's my life over the last 6-7 years. It's like hard. It's hard to believe. Especially if I go back to that moment where I was getting my first cap and I felt like I had been so frustrated to not be there earlier, and to, you know, you kind of, when you're young, you kind of feel like every moment is like the last opportunity. And now to like listen to that, it, you know, it was obviously not. There were so many opportunities after that and still ahead of me. And I do know that being on this team being on the US Women's National Team has been such a blessing. And it's an environment that is very challenging to be in, but it's become home, and it's become an environment that I thrive in. And I think that, you know, I wouldn't have been able to have the career I've had so far if it weren't for kind of adapting quickly into that really brutal, cutthroat culture, and having amazing support and teammates throughout it.
Talking about club career then, we'll move from country to club. Tell us about the move to Sweden. I assume from what you said before, it wasn't a difficult decision for you to make. You make a decision and you go with it, but it's moving a long way from home at that stage. Yeah,
so when I decided to move to Sweden the very first time, the US domestic league had actually just folded 4 days before, and we were at the very end of a transfer window. And I am a very dramatic person. I was even more dramatic when I was in my 20s. And I felt like when I heard that the league folded, like I had like a simple choice, like retire or go play in Sweden. And I did. I considered not playing. I think at that point, I had only been a professional for 1 year. I hadn't made the national team, and I wasn't enjoying playing. And, you know, I said, to hell with it. I'm going to go far away from here, far away from the national team dream, and just go play. And in my mind, I knew nothing of the international game. I knew nothing of, you know, European leagues. So for me, it was like, I'm going to give up on this dream. No one's ever going to see me play there. And I'm just going to go play and enjoy the game and try to enjoy it like I did when I was younger. And the story goes that the U.S. Women's National Team head coach was Pia, and she was Swedish. So I was only over there for 2 months before I got my first call up. And, you know, it's sort of the scenic route to the national team. But I think the most important factor there was like letting go of the dream. You kind of have to let it go and release it in order to get it. And that's something that, you know, football's taught me again and again. And it also is a lesson that's allowed me to really just like take decisions and like tough times with confidence and see them as blessings.
So let's talk about your move to Manchester United. Did you have a few options on the table? What was it about the club and the project that attracted you to Manchester in the first place?
Well, I think first and foremost, this league is, you know, doing really well, getting a lot of attention, and had attracted a lot of the top players. So that was very interesting to me. I always like to compete alongside and against the best. And I think a big part of that was the stability and consistency that I knew this league and this team could provide, being associated with the men's club during this very strange and unpredictable time. So those were really big things. And then the first conversation that I had was directly with Casey, and she is incredible, and you get a sense of who she is as a person right away. She's very serious. She cares a lot about what she does and who she's coaching. And it was quite obvious that it was going to be a special team and a special culture. And those were kind of the main things that I brought into this decision.
And because obviously it's been such a strange time in terms of the access that fans have had to their football clubs and things, how have you found your relationship with fans of the team?
Well, I am very sad that I won't have played a match in front of the United fans this whole season. I think when I joined, I thought, in January there'll be fans, we were all so naive. So we just kept thinking just a couple more months. I still think it's just a couple more months, but who knows? So I think that's been hard. I actually think playing in stadiums without fans is incredibly hard. I think it's a bigger deal than people even talk about, because it's weird to say, but it's challenging, and you kind of have to find something within you to really get you going, because the fans just bring so much. That being said, the fans have been very supportive from afar, and it was a great reception when we first joined the team, and we were so excited. And we've been living off the stories from the girls of the crazy fans, and these fans are the best. And would love to think that the performances and the games that we've had have been exciting and positive for them this year.
Although you've had no fans, has the competitiveness of the WSL lived up to your expectations?
Yeah, certainly. I think it's very different in terms of how the table is compared to the NWSL, where it really is any team could win on any day. There's definitely stronger teams here that win consistently, and that make it really hard to break that top three because they're not going to drop points that they're not supposed to. So I think that that has its own challenge, and then there's kind of an additional pressure when you play against a team that you're expected to beat. You cannot drop points. So I would say both leagues are very competitive, but in a different way.
Just a quick one on you mentioned about playing in empty stadiums. Of course, you played and scored at Old Trafford. What was that like?
Well, I think when I went into the moment, there was just a lot going on, and I didn't realize how monumental it was going to be. And when I just walked into the stadium, I had a feeling. And, as an American, we don't have such a rich history of football, and so you kind of come over to England to experience that. And I've only had glimpses of that in moments. But when I walked into Old Trafford, that was one of them. I could feel the history. I could feel the excitement and energy that just sat on the pitch, that just sat in the stadium, in the place where all the people were supposed to be. And it didn't feel like a game with no fans. It was one of the only ones. And obviously it would have felt worlds apart if it was full of fans. But it was really special.
He's at it alone, sends the ball in, press now for United. Christen press gets the second goal. A lovely bit of play between Jackie Groenen and Christen press. And United have doubled their lead here at Old Trafford. Manchester United 2, West Ham 0.
How have you helped to mentor your fellow teammates over the last year, because they probably look to you as, sorry to say it, but a senior professional now? That it is a young squad and you're maybe one of the older ones. How have you taken that role on, and do you like it?
Yeah, definitely. I think that I have been an experienced player now for a couple of seasons, and it's something that I embrace. I mentorship. I love being mentored as much as mentoring, and that's has a special place obviously in the locker room. So I think there's a couple of things. There's also like a cultural barrier. So there's just like cultural differences between how my English teammates approach the game. And so I think a lot of the things that I've like shared and taught them are kind of just like about an American mentality and like how we see the game and how we see winning and striving for greatness. And, you know, there's just like little things like flipping your sentence. So, you know, something simple like when you're approaching like a scouting report, the ideology here is, oh, how are they going to beat us? And like in the US, we would never say that. It was like, oh, what are their strengths? You know, like you could maybe give them that, but like you would never say like, how are they going to beat us? Because like they're not going to beat us. So it's just little things like that I feel like have been really helpful and positive in the group to take a more positive approach to what's coming and actually try to like start to manifest your wins. And like, you know, if the team had dropped points in a match in the previous season, they would talk about it a lot. Like, oh, last time we played away at this stadium, like we didn't win. And it's like that rhetoric I had to squash that really early. Like you have to manifest the future that you want. And I think culturally there here was like a sense of like what had happened previously. So that was a big part of it. And I think the other thing is it's a training team. It's a team that works really hard. We have huge training volumes. It's a young team and they're developing. And it's hugely positive. It's been really positive for me because I've been in performance mode for the last few years, which means to me, like you only do what you need to do to be your best on Sunday, which is very limited in training. So to be in a grind, in a culture where like they do expect you to show up at training and be your best and like earn your spot every week was really great. And one thing that I think it has to be balanced with is like also like a deep sense of like self. So like you're knowing your body, like self-knowledge, and then being able to stand up and say like, this isn't right. I can't do this. I need this. So that's something that I have always done my whole career. I've been lucky to stay healthy, and I've tried to share that with the girls here.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I have a question. We don't have loads of time, which is why people listening might sort of think this is all over the place. But I have to ask, what does it feel like to win a World Cup?
Oh, my favorite question. And I always feel like I'm going to disappoint people because it is absolutely a life-changing experience. Like there's not very many moments that you can point to that moment in your life and say like everything changed. And actually in 2015, winning that first World Cup, my life changed. I went from just being a person in the world that was just me and only known by the people that like I met, to a completely different lifestyle, being known, walking around, having to deal with a certain level of fame that I was like deeply uncomfortable with. Also more economic opportunity, which allowed me to reinvest in my game. And so it was like a life-changing moment. And the way it felt was overwhelming. It's like you can't feel as those things are happening to you. You're just like, you're almost experiencing them like as if you're watching. And then I think now I will lay on the couch and think like, what if we hadn't won? And I know my life would be the same. And like, I know that like winning and losing like feels like it's so important, and it is so important, but like ultimately it's just like a piece of the puzzle. And like I have to be like a complete and healthy person that like is content with whatever my life brings, and I am. So there's that like duality of like the magnitude of like what it actually means, and then like how I experience it as an individual.
That's a very eloquent answer. So better than being in The Simpsons?
Better than being in The Simpsons. Yeah, yes, certainly.
I think you might be our first guest that's appeared in The Simpsons.
Really?
Yeah, I think in 80-odd episodes. I can't think of... I mean, I've not done any research on this. I'm just shooting from... I think you're the first guest we've had that's been in The Simpsons. I think.
What a random fact to bring to this.
Yeah, it felt important. We have one last question, and I think it's appropriate that Helen asks it, as she always asks it.
It always falls to me. Thank you so much for your time. By the way, it's been an absolute pleasure.
It has been. It's been great
to have you on the podcast. Yes, before we go, we just want to ask for a recommendation for a teammate that you might have that might have some good stories for the podcast for us.
Oh, a teammate that would have good stories about me?
Well, if you like.
Well, it can be about you, but more so about themselves.
All of the girls are amazing and interesting. If you're looking for just like an interesting person, like Zel's the go-to.
That's
a
fair
team answer. Team answer.
Everyone's so unique and beautiful in their own way.
Don't expect that kind of teamwork from a centre forward, if I'm honest.
That's the beauty of a podcast, is every single person's interesting.
True.
If you just like take the time to like get in there, you know?
Exactly. Christen, thank you so much for chatting to us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.